You think you know your family, until you discover they're hiding a secret that could change everything. I never imagined my mother and stepfather would hide my grandfather's will from me. They thought I'd stay quiet, thought I was weak, thought I knew nothing. But what they didn't expect was this: I already had in my hands the very thing they feared most. The game they started, I was about to rewrite every single rule. They say blood is thicker than water, but when that blood turns poisonous, sometimes you have to drain it all to survive. My name is Harper Lawson, and until 6 months ago, I believed in the sanctity of family above all else. Now, sitting in my grandfather's workshop, surrounded by the ghost of sawdust and old dreams, I understand that belief was my greatest weakness. Grandpa Walter wasn't just my grandfather, he was my North Star. While other kids had parents who helped with homework, I had Walter Lawson, master restoration architect, who taught me that buildings, like people, could be saved if you understood their bones. He'd built his empire from nothing, 2 calloused hands, and an immigrant's determination transformed into a legacy worth millions. "Harper," he'd say, running his weathered fingers along a beam of reclaimed Douglas fir. "Everything worth having requires 3 things: patience, respect for what came before, and the spine to protect what's yours." I was 8 when he first told me that. Standing in this very workshop while he restored a Victorian mantelpiece, 26 years later, those words would become my battle cry. Growing up, our Sunday rituals were sacred. Mom would drop me off at Walter's craftsman-style home in Portland's Laurelhurst neighborhood, a magnificent 1911 beauty. He'd restored himself and disappear until evening. Those were our days. We'd work on projects, him teaching me about load-bearing walls and the poetry of proper restoration, me absorbing every word like scripture. "This house," he'd tell me, gesturing at the coffered ceilings and built-in cabinets, "isn't just wood and nails, it's a testament. When I'm gone, it stays with you. Harper, promise me that." I promised? Of course I promised. What granddaughter wouldn't? The last time I saw him alive was a Thursday. Unusual, because our meetings had shifted to weekends as my software engineering career demanded longer hours. But he'd called, insistent. "Need to show you something," he'd said, voice raspier than usual. In his study, he'd pulled out a wooden box, intricate marquetry covering its surface, another of his creations. "Remember this," he said, not opening it, just pressing it into my hands. "When the wolves come circling, remember this box." I'd laughed. "What wolves, Grandpa?" He didn't smile. "The ones wearing familiar faces." 3 days later, a massive heart attack took him while he slept. Quick, the doctor said, merciful, but there was nothing merciful about the aftermath. At the funeral, I noticed the shift immediately. Mom Elaine kept exchanging glances with Richard, her husband of 12 years. My stepfather had always been peripheral to my relationship with Walter, tolerating but never embracing the bond we shared. Now, he stood too close to the casket, possessive in a way that made my skin crawl. "We need to discuss the estate," Richard announced at the reception, loud enough for the lawyers and distant relatives to hear. "Walter left everything in order. Elaine inherits as his only child. Naturally." "Naturally," Mom echoed, not meeting my eyes. Something cold settled in my stomach. In 26 years of Sundays, Walter had never once suggested Mom would inherit the house. The house was mine, we'd discussed it countless times. He'd even shown me where he kept the maintenance records, the restoration documentation, the historical registry papers. "What about the will?" I asked. Richard's smile was all teeth. "Like I said, everything's in order. No need to burden yourself with details during this difficult time." Mom finally looked at me then, and in her eyes, I saw it guilt, sharp and undeniable. "Your grandfather wouldn't want us fighting over material things," she said, voice steady as a surgeon's hand. "He loved us all equally." Equally. The word tasted like ash. Walter Lawson never did anything equally. He was a man of precise measurements and deliberate choices. Every beam, every joint, every decision had purpose. Standing there, Surrounded by people pretending to mourn while calculating their potential gains, I remembered the box, the wolves wearing familiar faces. My grandfather had seen this coming, had tried to warn me. That night, alone in my Pearl District apartment, I opened the box he'd given me. Inside, wrapped in velvet, was a USB drive and a note in his shaky handwriting. "The truth is in the walls. Harper. Start in the workshop. Trust no one but the evidence." My grandfather was gone, but he'd left me more than memories. He'd left me ammunition. The key to Grandpa Walter's house felt heavier than usual as I stood on the wraparound porch 2 weeks after the funeral. Mom and Richard had already been here, I could tell by the fresh scratches around the lock. Amateur attempts at changing it, but Walter had given me a key they didn't know about. One to the original Victorian mortise lock he'd restored but kept functional. Inside, the house felt violated. The air hung different, disturbed. They'd been through everything, leaving subtle signs of their search books slightly misaligned, drawer pulls not quite centered. They were looking for something, the will, perhaps, or maybe they were cataloging their inheritance. I headed straight to the workshop, a converted carriage house Walter had transformed into his sanctuary. This was where the real work happened, where 100-year-old wood got a second chance at life. The smell hit me first: linseed oil, cedar, the ghost of 1,000 projects. Following his note, I searched the walls. Behind a pegboard of carefully maintained tools, I found a recessed panel, invisible unless you knew the grain pattern was interrupted. Inside, filing boxes marked by year, going back decades, building permits, contracts, receipts, a paper trail of Walter's entire career. But one box, labeled 2019 present, contained more than routine documentation. There were appraisals, recent ones. The house alone was valued at $3.2 million, prime Portland real estate with historical designation. The workshop and grounds added another $800,000. Various investment accounts, meticulously documented, totaled just over $700,000. My heart raced as I photographed everything. Then I found the correspondence with Hartley and Associates, a high-end estate law firm downtown. Letters discussing the trust, Harper's inheritance, and protecting the legacy from undue influence. The most recent letter, dated just a month before his death, referenced a video amendment to his will. A car door slammed outside. Through the dusty window, I watched Mom and Richard exit their Tesla. Richard carrying a measuring tape, and Mom holding what looked like color swatches. My blood turned to ice as I heard their conversation drift through the thin walls. "The modern kitchen will add at least $200,000 to the asking price," Richard was saying. "Tear out all this old craftsman bullshit. Open floor plan. White and chrome everything." "The Historical Society might object," Mom replied, but her tone was calculating, not concerned. "They only protect the exterior. We can gut the inside, flip it within 6 months, maybe $800,000 profit, minimum." Flip it. They were going to destroy everything Walter had spent his life preserving and sell it to the highest bidder. I slipped out the back as they entered through the front, taking the 2019 box with me. At home, I spent the night going through every document. That's when I founded a contract with a storage facility across town. Unit 447 paid up for 5 years in advance. The next morning, I stood before Unit 447 with trembling hands. Inside were more boxes, but also furniture pieces Walter had been restoring for the house, items he'd removed recently. Why move them unless he knew someone might destroy or sell them? In a climate-controlled section sat a fireproof safe. The combination was my birth date, of course it was. Inside, I found original architectural drawings of the house, photographs documenting every restoration, and a leather journal filled with Walter's meticulous notes about the property's history and his work. The final entry, dated a week before his death, made my hands shake. They think I don't know about Richard's debts, about the gambling, about the second mortgage on Elaine's condo. They think I don't see them circling like vultures, waiting, but I've prepared everything. Harper will know what to do. The house must be preserved. The legacy must continue. I should have done more to protect her from them, but I was weak, hoping Elaine would choose her daughter over greed. I was wrong. The USB drive from the wooden box suddenly made sense. I rushed home and plugged it in. Password protected. But I knew immediately it was the date he'd first shown me how to restore wood. Written in his peculiar style, the drive contained scanned documents, including multiple drafts of wills, all clearly stating I was to inherit the house and the majority of the estate. The most recent was dated just 2 months ago, properly witnessed and notarized. But there was more. Screenshots of emails between Richard and someone named Garrett Wolfe, discussing the old man's estate and keeping the daughter in the dark. One message from Richard read, "Once we get the death certificate, we move fast. Elaine's on board. The will we showed Prescott should hold up if Harper doesn't dig too deep." They'd forged a will. They'd planned this while Walter was still alive. Maybe even hastened his death, though I couldn't prove that. Yet, I sat back, overwhelmed by the betrayal, but oddly calm. Walter had known, he'd prepared, and now, armed with his evidence, I was ready to fight. The wolves had shown their teeth, but they'd forgotten one thing: I was raised by Walter Lawson, and he'd taught me that when someone tries to tear down what you've built, you don't just defend, you demolish them. Mr. Prescott's office smelled like old leather and disappointment. The family lawyer, who'd handled Walter's affairs for 15 years, couldn't meet my eyes as he shuffled papers on his mahogany desk. "I'm afraid I don't have a copy of your grandfather's will." "Harper," he said, his voice strained. "Your mother and stepfather brought in the original last week. Everything was in order." "You didn't keep a copy," I pressed, watching sweat bead on his forehead. "There was an unfortunate incident with our filing system, water damage. Several documents were destroyed." His hands trembled slightly. "Including any copies of your grandfather's estate planning documents." Water damage. In a climate-controlled office on the 15th floor. I didn't challenge him. I just smiled and thanked him for his time. On my way out, his secretary whispered, "Your grandfather was a good man. I'm sorry." She knew. They all knew. That Sunday, Mom invited me for dinner the first time since the funeral. Their Lake Oswego house felt like a stage set, everything positioned for maximum impact. Richard's 2 adult children from his first marriage were there, Tyler and Madison, both sporting new designer clothes and smirking like cats with cream. "We wanted to discuss the future as a family," Mom began, pouring wine with steady hands. "Your grandfather's house needs significant work to maintain its value." "Which is why we're modernizing it," Richard interrupted, cutting his steak with unnecessary force. "Already have contractors lined up. Demo starts next month." "Demo." I kept my voice level. "On a historically registered craftsman home." Tyler laughed. "Come on, Harper. Nobody wants those creaky old houses anymore. Dad's going to make it contemporary, add some real value." "Besides," Madison added, twirling her new tennis bracelet, "Grandpa Richard says we'll all benefit from the sale, family shares and all that." "Grandpa Richard," the words hit like acid. "Interesting," I said, setting down my fork. "And what does the will say about these family shares?" The table went silent. Mom's face flushed. Richard leaned back, a predator assessing prey. "The will leaves everything to your mother, as Walter's only child," he said slowly. "She's generously decided to share the proceeds with all of us, including you, of course." "Can I see it, the will?" "Why?" Mom's voice cracked slightly. "Don't you trust us?" I looked at my mother, really looked at her, the woman who'd raised me, who'd driven me to Walter's every Sunday, who'd said she loved me every night before bed. Now she sat there, lying to my face, willing to destroy everything her father had built for money she didn't even need. "I'd just like to see it," I said simply, "for closure." Richard stood abruptly. "The will is with the probate court, public record. Look it up yourself if you're so concerned." He paused at the dining room doorway. "But Harper, don't make this difficult. You're getting a share you don't deserve. Your grandfather left everything to Elaine for a reason. Accept it gracefully." After he left, Mom reached for my hand. I pulled away. "He was my father, too," she said quietly. I deserve this. You have a $2 million condo and a household income of $400K a year, I replied. What you deserve and what you're stealing are two different things. Her mask finally slipped. You always were his favorite. Even when you were a baby, it was always Harper this, Harper that. Do you know what it's like to compete with your own child for your father's attention? So this is revenge. This is justice, she hissed. I'm his blood. You're just the granddaughter. The estate belongs with me. I stood to leave, then turned back. Mom, I need you to hear this clearly. I know what you did. I know about the forged will. I know about Richard's gambling debts. I know about the second mortgage. And I know about Garrett Wolfe. The color drained from her face. I don't know what you're... You have 1 week to produce the real will, I continued. 1 week to make this right. After that, I stop being the granddaughter and start being the executor of Walter Lawson's actual estate. Richard appeared in the doorway, his face dark with rage. You threatening us. Little girl. I smiled, Walter's lessons echoing in my mind. I'm not threatening anyone, Richard. I'm just telling you how this ends. You can choose the easy way or the hard way, but either way, you're not destroying that house, and you're not stealing what Walter left me. You have nothing, he snarled. No proof, no will, no claim. I pulled out my phone and played a single line from Walter's video, just his voice saying, I leave my house to my granddaughter, Harper Lawson. Richard's face went white. Mom gasped. 1 week, I repeated, walking past Tyler and Madison's shocked faces. Then I bring everything to light, everything. As I drove away, my hands shook with adrenaline and grief. The confrontation was over. The war had just begun. The week passed in silence. No calls, no texts, no olive branches. Instead, Mom and Richard launched their campaign. It started with Aunt Caroline, Mom's sister, calling me at work. Harper, sweetie, your mother is devastated. How could you threaten her like that, after everything she's done for you? Then came the cousins, the family friends, even Mrs. Patterson from next door to Walter's house, each with the same message: I was being greedy, cruel, destroying the family over money I didn't need. Richard had crafted the narrative perfectly, the successful software engineer trying to steal from her grieving mother. My Facebook filled with messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Shame on you, Harper. Your grandfather would be disgusted. Money changes people, I guess. Mom had posted a carefully worded status about family betrayal during the hardest time of her life, garnering hundreds of sympathetic comments. But the worst came from my own workplace. My manager pulled me aside Friday afternoon. Harper, I received a concerning call about your mental state. Your stepfather suggested you might be having a breakdown, making false accusations, acting paranoid. He seemed genuinely worried. Richard had called my employer. The bastard was trying to establish a pattern of instability. That evening, I found Tyler waiting by my car in the parking garage. Dad wants you to know the offer stands, he said, blocking my path. Take your share quietly, or lose everything noisily. Move, I said. You know, Harper, you were always such a daddy's girl. Oh, wait, he smirked. You don't have a daddy, do you? Just a dead grandpa who loved you more than your own mother did. The urge to hit him was overwhelming, but I recognized the setup. He was recording, hoping to provoke me. I smiled instead. Tyler, did Richard tell you about the forensic accountant I hired? The one tracking the money he borrowed from Garrett Wolfe? No, you should ask him. His smirk faltered. I got in my car and left him standing there. Saturday morning, I woke to find my apartment building's management had received a complaint about disturbing behavior from my unit. My social media accounts were flooded with hate from strangers. Richard had hired a reputation management firm to destroy me online. 3 clients canceled contracts with me, citing concerns about professional stability. They were systematically dismantling my life. I met my friend Sarah for coffee, one of the few people still talking to me. Harper, maybe you should just let it go, she said gently. Is a house really worth losing your entire family? Sarah, If someone stole your child's inheritance, would you let it go? But you don't have children. No, I said quietly. But Walter's house is his legacy. Every beam, every restored detail, every carefully preserved piece of history. They want to gut it. Sarah, turn it into some modern monstrosity and flip it for profit. She stirred her latte uncomfortably. Your mom says you've become obsessed, that you're making things up about a will that doesn't exist. Even Sarah was starting to doubt me. That afternoon, I returned to Walter's house to find a construction crew already there, Richard directing them with expansive gestures. Harper, he called out cheerfully for the workers' benefit, come to help with the renovation. You can't start construction without permits, I said. Oh, we're just measuring, planning. Your mother's house needs so much work. He emphasized your mother's while the crew watched. Unless you have some legal objection. One of the workers, an older man with calloused hands like Walter's, caught my eye. He looked uncomfortable, apologetic even. He knew whose house this really was. Mom appeared on the porch, playing the gracious matriarch. Harper, honey, please don't make a scene. These men are just trying to do their job. Just like you're just trying to steal my inheritance. The workers shifted uncomfortably. Mom's mask never slipped. Sweetheart, I know you're grieving. We all are. But these delusions about secret wills and conspiracies. Richard's right. You need help. That's when I realized their new strategy. They weren't just trying to steal the estate, they were building a case that I was mentally unstable. Every interaction was being documented, twisted, weaponized. I have the real will, I said loudly, clearly for everyone to hear. Walter's actual will, leaving the house to me, and in 4 days, I'm filing it with the court. Richard stepped forward, concerned patriarch personified. Harper, there is no other will. Your grandfather's wishes were clear. Please, let your mother help you through this difficult time. I looked at the workers, then at my mother, then at Richard. 4 days, I repeated. Enjoy the house while you can. As I walked away, I heard Richard tell the crew, Poor girl. Walter's death hit her hard. We're trying to get her the help she needs. That night, alone in my apartment, I cried for the first time since Walter's funeral, not from grief over his death, but from the death of my family. The mother I thought I knew was gone, replaced by a stranger willing to destroy me for money. But Walter had prepared me for this. When someone shows you who they really are, he'd said once, believe them the first time. I opened my laptop and began composing emails to my lawyer. The week was up. Time to show them who Harper Lawson really was, Walter's granddaughter. Through and through. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. Monday morning. I sat across from Miranda Chen Martinez, one of Portland's most ruthless estate attorneys. She'd reviewed everything over the weekend, the real will, the forged documents, the email evidence, Walter's video testimony. This is bigger than inheritance fraud, she said, adjusting her glasses. This is conspiracy, forgery, potentially elder abuse. Did your grandfather ever mention feeling pressured? He kept them at arm's length the last year, I replied. Now I know why. I'm bringing in a private investigator, James Hoffman, former FBI, specializes in financial crimes. She slid his card across the desk. We need to document everything before they destroy more evidence. Hoffman was thorough. Within 48 hours, he'd uncovered a labyrinth of Richard's deceptions. The gambling debts were worse than I'd imagined, $800,000 to various creditors, including some dangerous people. He'd taken out loans against Mom's condo without her knowledge, forging her signature, but the most damning discovery was a $50,000 payment to Garrett Wolf 2 days after Walter's death for document services. Wolf's a known forger, Hoffman explained. Works out of Seattle, thinks he's untouchable, but he made a mistake. He used the same notary seal from a case 3 years ago. It's on FBI record. Meanwhile, I worked with a forensic accountant to trace Richard's theft. He'd already sold 2 of Walter's vintage cars from the estate, pocketing $120,000. He'd liquidated investment accounts, claiming executor privileges with the fake will, Total theft so far, $340,000. We need to freeze the assets immediately, Miranda said. Before they strip everything. We filed for an emergency injunction Thursday morning. By noon, Richard was served at his office, his real estate company. I learned, was also under investigation for fraud. Mom was served at her yoga class. The local news picked up the story. Portland Heritage Home at center of million-dollar inheritance battle. That evening, Richard appeared at my apartment, pounding on the door. Open up. Harper, we need to talk. I called 911, then started recording on my phone. When I wouldn't answer, he began screaming through the door. You think you're smart. You have no idea who you're messing with. I will destroy you. You'll have nothing. The police arrived as he was kicking my door. He tried to play it cool, claiming a family misunderstanding, but my recording told a different story. They arrested him for criminal threatening and attempted breaking and entering. Mom called from the police station. How could you have Richard arrested? He's your stepfather. He's a criminal who stole from Walter's estate and threatened me. Those are facts, not family relations. Harper, please, call off the lawyers. We can work this out privately. Like you worked out the forged will privately. Silence. Then, quietly. I didn't know about the forgery. Richard said he found the will in Walter's desk. I believed him. No, Mom, you chose to believe him. There's a difference. She started crying. He said we deserved it, that Walter was going to leave you everything and forget about me. His own daughter. Richard said it wasn't fair. So you let him steal from me instead. I thought we could share it, all of us, as a family. We were a family, I said, until you chose Richard's lies over Walter's wishes and over me. Friday brought more revelations. Hoffman had found Richard's communications with contractors he'd already paid deposits for the demolition, planning to gut Walter's house before the court could stop him. The contractor, feeling guilty, had actually called Walter 2 weeks before his death to confirm the plans. Your grandfather knew, Hoffman said. The contractor says Walter was furious, threatened legal action. 2 days later, Walter was dead. My blood went cold. Are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything yet, but the medical examiner is taking another look at the toxicology report. That afternoon, Madison confronted me at a coffee shop. You've ruined everything. Dad's in jail. The wedding's canceled. What wedding? She faltered. Mine. Dad promised. Once the house sold, she started crying. He said we'd all be rich, said Harper wouldn't fight back, that you were too weak, too soft. Madison, did Richard ever mention hurting Walter? Her eyes widened. No, he said the old man was dying anyway, that his heart was bad, that it was just a matter of time. I recorded our entire conversation. Madison didn't realize she'd just admitted Richard had been planning this while Walter was still alive. By Saturday, our case was ironclad. The forensic evidence was overwhelming. The forged will had 17 discrepancies from Walter's genuine signature, the real will, Walter's video. The financial trail, it all painted a clear picture of premeditated fraud. But the strongest evidence came from an unexpected source. Mr. Prescott, the family lawyer, walked into Miranda's office with a box of documents. I couldn't live with it anymore, he said, hands shaking. Richard threatened my granddaughter if I didn't play along, said he knew where she went to school. But I kept copies of everything, the real will, the forgery, recorded phone calls where he threatened me. I'm ready to testify. The dominoes were falling. Richard's house of cards was collapsing. And Mom, she was about to learn that choosing the wrong side had consequences that no amount of tears could wash away. Walter had taught me well, when you build something true and strong, it stands against any storm. But when you build on lies and deception, one tremor brings it all crashing down. The courthouse buzzed with reporters the morning our case went to trial. $1 million family feud, the headlines screamed. Richard had made bail and hired Clarence Rothstein, Portland's most aggressive defense attorney, known for turning victims into villains. My client is the real victim here, Rothstein announced on the courthouse steps. A grieving widow manipulated by a bitter granddaughter who expected everything and got nothing. Inside courtroom 7. Judge Patricia Hawthorne presided, a no-nonsense former prosecutor with a reputation for seeing through theatrics. Mom sat behind Richard, wearing black like she was still in mourning. She wouldn't look at me. Miranda opened with devastating precision. Your Honor, we'll prove that Richard Steinman and Elaine Steinman conspired to forge Walter Lawson's will, steal from his estate, and defraud the rightful beneficiary. This isn't a family dispute, it's criminal fraud. Rothstein painted me as unstable, greedy, vindictive. Harper Lawson was obsessed with her grandfather, unhealthily so. When she discovered he'd left his estate to his actual daughter, she concocted this elaborate conspiracy theory. The first week was brutal. Rothstein brought in character witnesses, friends of Mom's, who testified I'd always been difficult and possessive of Walter. Richard's children testified about my threatening behavior and mental instability. But then our witnesses took the stand. Mr. Prescott's testimony was damning. He detailed Richard's threats, played recordings of phone calls where Richard explicitly discussed forging documents. The courtroom gasped when they heard Richard say, "The old man's will goes missing, and our version appears. Harper won't know the difference." The forensic document examiner explained the forgery in detail. 17 distinct variations from Mr. Lawson's authentic signature. This wasn't even a good forgery, it was rushed, sloppy. Hoffman presented the financial evidence, bank records, liquidated accounts, the payment to Garrett Wolfe. Mr. Steinman has stolen $463,000 from the estate in just 2 months, he stated flatly. Then came the contractor, Marcus Webb, an honest man with 30 years in construction. Mr. Lawson called me 2 weeks before he died, he testified. He was furious, said Richard Steinman had no authority to demolish anything. He was talking about restraining orders, lawsuits, then he died, and Mr. Steinman said plans were back on. On day 3, Garrett Wolfe was brought in. He'd been arrested in Seattle and offered a deal for his testimony. The forger looked like a weasel caught in headlights. Richard Steinman paid me $50,000 to create a will, he admitted. Said the old man had died suddenly without proper documentation. I've done similar work for him before. What kind of work? Miranda pressed. Loan documents, signatures, his wife's name on mortgages. Mom's gasp was audible. She stared at Richard with dawning horror. The prosecution presented Walter's real will, properly witnessed and notarized. Then came the video Walter, frail but fierce, speaking directly to the camera. I, Walter Francis Lawson, being of sound mind, leave my house and the majority of my estate to my granddaughter, Harper Marie Lawson. She understands the value of preservation, of legacy, of hard work. My daughter Elaine has received ample support throughout her life. The house goes to Harper, along with 70% of my liquid assets. This is my final wish. Mom started crying. Richard tried to comfort her, but she pulled away. When Richard took the stand, he was all wounded innocence. He'd found the will, believed it was genuine, was only trying to protect his wife's interests. Rothstein worked to rehabilitate his image, but Miranda's cross-examination was surgical. Mr. Steinman, how much do you owe to various creditors? That's not relevant. $800,000, isn't it? Including some dangerous people? I don't see how. You needed money desperately, didn't you? And Walter Lawson's estate was your solution? She presented email after email, text after text, each one showing Richard's planning, his deception, his greed. You called Harper's employer, claiming she was mentally unstable. Why? I was concerned. You hired a reputation management firm to destroy her online presence. Concern. She was attacking our family. You mean she was exposing your crimes? By the time Mom took the stand, she looked broken. Yes, she'd believed Richard. Yes, she'd gone along with contesting Walter's wishes. No, she hadn't known about the forgery initially. When did you learn the truth? Miranda asked gently. Mom looked at me for the first time in weeks. The night Harper confronted us, when she mentioned Garrett Wolfe, I knew then. Richard had used him before. For the mortgage papers, I knew. And I said nothing. Why? Because I wanted to believe I deserved it, that after years of being second to Harper in my father's eyes, I deserved the estate. Her voice cracked. I was wrong. About everything. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood with a paper that would determine everything. We find in favor of the plaintiff, Harper Lawson, on all counts. The courtroom erupted. Richard jumped up, shouting about appeals. But the judge wasn't finished. Mr. Steinman, you're remanded into custody pending criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and theft. Mrs. Steinman, you'll be charged as an accessory after the fact. As the bailiffs cuffed Richard, he turned to me with pure hatred. This isn't over. Yes, I said quietly. It is. Mom stood frozen as they read her rights. Our eyes met across the courtroom, mother and daughter. Strangers now. I'm sorry, she mouthed. I turned and walked away. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. The final hearing was set for a Friday morning in September. 3 weeks after the jury verdict, criminal proceedings against Richard were moving forward separately. But this hearing would officially transfer the estate to me. I thought we were done with surprises. I was wrong. Miranda called me Thursday night. Harper, Richard's attorney filed an emergency motion. They claimed to have new evidence that could overturn everything. What evidence? They won't say, just that it's significant enough to warrant reopening the case. I didn't sleep that night. What could they possibly have? We'd been so thorough, so careful. Friday morning, the courtroom was packed again. Richard was there in custody, orange jumpsuit replacing his usual expensive suits. Mom sat separately. Her own attorney beside her, she'd filed for divorce and was cooperating with prosecutors for a reduced sentence. Rothstein stood with theatrical gravitas. Your Honor, we've discovered video evidence that Walter Lawson was not of sound mind when he created his final will. My heart stopped. He produced a tablet. This video was taken by Madison Steinman 3 weeks before Mr. Lawson's death, during a family dinner. The video played on the courtroom screen. Walter at the dinner table, confused, calling Richard by the wrong name, asking why his deceased wife wasn't joining them. He looked lost, frightened, clearly experiencing some form of cognitive episode. As you can see, Rothstein continued, Mr. Lawson was suffering from dementia. Any will created during this period would be invalid. I felt the case slipping away, but Miranda squeezed my hand and stood. Your Honor, we'd like to present our own evidence regarding this video. Judge Hawthorne nodded. Proceed. Miranda connected her laptop. This is the complete, unedited video from that evening, obtained from Madison Steinman's cloud storage via subpoena. The full video began 20 minutes earlier. Walter was sharp, discussing architecture with Madison, perfectly lucid. Then Richard handed him a drink. Your medication, Walter. Within minutes, Walter became confused, disoriented. We had Mr. Lawson's medical records reviewed by Dr. Sarah Brennan, a neurologist specializing in elder care. Miranda continued. Dr. Brennan, please take the stand. The doctor was clear and professional. Mr. Lawson showed no signs of dementia in any medical examination. However, certain medications, when combined with alcohol, can cause temporary confusion identical to what we see in this video. What medications? Benzodiazepines, particularly when mixed with alcohol. The effects are temporary but dramatic. Miranda presented pharmacy records. Richard Steinman filled a prescription for lorazepam 2 days before this dinner. He's not prescribed this medication. The courtroom buzzed. Judge Hawthorne called for order. There's more, Miranda said. She clicked to another file and audio recording. Richard's voice filled the courtroom. The old man's getting suspicious. We need to move faster. Mom's voice responded, Richard, what did you give him at dinner? He was completely out of it. Just something to make him compliant. Don't worry about it. You drugged him. Relax, Elaine. It's harmless. But if anyone asks, he's showing signs of dementia. Understand? Mom stood up in the courtroom. I recorded that, she said, her voice strong. After the dinner, I was suspicious. I've been recording Richard for weeks. I have more recordings. Everything's on this drive. She held up a USB drive, then handed it to the bailiff. Richard exploded. You bitch! You were supposed to be on my side. I was, Mom said, turning to face him. Until you started drugging my father. Until you turned me into someone I didn't recognize. I've been cooperating with Harper's team for the last week. This was news to me. Miranda had kept Mom's cooperation secret to prevent Richard from interfering. Judge Hawthorne reviewed the evidence, then made her ruling. The video evidence presented by the defense actually proves the opposite of their claim. It shows deliberate elder abuse and attempted manipulation of Mr. Lawson. The original verdict stands, and I'm adding charges of elder abuse to Mr. Steinman's criminal case. But there was one more surprise. Miranda stood again. Your Honor, there's one final piece of evidence. Mr. Lawson left a sealed letter to be opened only if the will was contested. The judge opened the letter and read aloud. If you're reading this, then my fears have come true. Richard Steinman has been planning to steal my estate for over a year. I've documented everything, every threat, every manipulation, every attempt to control me. But more importantly, I want the court to know why I chose Harper. She never asked for anything, never expected anything. She came to see me every week, not for money, but for love. She learned my craft, preserved my values, understood that legacy isn't about money, it's about preserving what matters. To my daughter Elaine, I loved you always, but you chose comfort over character. You let that man poison your mind against your own daughter. I hope someday you find your way back to who you were. To Harper. The house is yours. But more than that, the responsibility is yours. Keep it standing, keep it true, like you kept faith in me. And to Richard Steinman, I knew what you were from the day we met. Every drink you gave me, every paper you tried to make me sign, every lie you told, I documented it all. You thought I was a weak old man. You were wrong. My final words to the court, Harper Lawson is my true heir, not just in property but in spirit. Let my wishes stand. The courtroom was silent. Even Richard had stopped struggling against his restraints. Judge Hawthorne's final words rang out. The estate of Walter Francis Lawson is hereby transferred in full to Harper Marie Lawson. Court is adjourned. As people filed out, Mom approached me. Harper, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. You're right, I said. You don't. But I want you to know, the recordings, the cooperation, it wasn't for a lighter sentence. It was because I finally remembered who my father raised me to be, and who I raised you to be. I looked at my mother, really looked at her. She seemed smaller somehow, diminished by her choices. Goodbye, Mom. I walked out into the September sunshine. Walter's real legacy finally, fully mine. 6 months later, I stood in Walter's workshop, my workshop now running my hands along the same beam of Douglas fir where this story began. The sawdust still lingered in the air, but now it felt like home rather than haunting. The house had been returned to its original glory. Every modernization Richard had started was reversed. The original crown molding was restored, the built-in cabinets refinished, the wooden floors brought back to their warm, honeyed glow. I'd hired Marcus Webb, the contractor who testified for us, to lead the restoration. Your grandfather would be proud, he said the day we finished. This is exactly how he envisioned it. Richard was serving 12 years for fraud, forgery, elder abuse, and theft. His assets were liquidated to pay back what he'd stolen. Tyler and Madison had disappeared from Portland entirely. Their social media presence scrubbed clean. I heard Madison moved to Arizona, started over. I hoped she'd learned something from all this. Mom received 2 years probation and community service. The judge considered her cooperation and the evidence that Richard had manipulated her. She sent letters every week for the first 3 months. I returned them all unopened. Then they stopped coming. Last week, though, something unexpected happened. I was at the grocery store when I saw her. She looked older, tired. Working as a cashier, Richard's legal bills had consumed everything, and the divorce left her with nothing but debt. Our eyes met across the checkout lane. "Harper," she said quietly. I could have gone to another line, could have walked away, but Walter's words echoed, "Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose who you want to be, not who pain makes you become." "Hello, Mom." "The house. I drove by last week. It looks beautiful, just like Dad kept it." That was the point. She nodded, scanning my items with practiced efficiency. "I'm in therapy now, real therapy, not the kind Richard suggested for you. I'm learning about why I made the choices I did, why I let him convince me I deserved more than Dad wanted to give. And I learned that I was jealous of you, of your relationship with him. It made me vulnerable to Richard's poison." She handed me my receipt. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I see it now, all of it." I took my bags and started to leave, then turned back. "Mom, I'm having a restoration celebration next month. For the house, Marcus and his crew, some of Grandpa's old friends, the Historical Society people. If you wanted to come." Her eyes filled with tears. "Really?" "It's what Walter would want. He believed in second chances, in restoration. But Mom, this isn't forgiveness. It's just a start. A start is more than I deserve." I left without another word, but I knew she'd be there. Walter always said buildings could be restored if you understood their bones. Maybe people could too. Maybe. The night of the celebration, the house glowed with warmth. Dozens of people who'd known Walter came to see his legacy preserved. The Historical Society presented me with a plaque designating the house as a protected landmark. Mr. Prescott, seeking his own redemption, had paid for it himself. Mom arrived last, standing uncertainly at the garden gate. I watched her take in the house, saw her touch the doorframe where Walter had marked my height every year, saw her remember who we used to be before greed poisoned everything. "Harper," Mrs. Patterson from next door grabbed my arm. "Your grandfather would be so proud. You didn't just save the house, you saved his story." As the evening wound down, I found myself alone in Walter's study. The wooden box that started everything sat on his desk, inside, where the USB drive had been. I'd placed a photo Walter and me in the workshop, covered in sawdust, grinning at the camera. On the back, I'd written his words, "Everything worth having requires 3 things: patience, respect for what came before, and the spine to protect what's yours." I'd learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes protecting what's yours means fighting your own family. Sometimes it means standing alone. But sometimes, just sometimes, it means being strong enough to leave the door cracked open for redemption. The house stood solid around me, every beam and board a testament to preservation over profit, legacy over greed. Richard had tried to tear it down. Mom had helped him. But Walter had built something stronger than their betrayal. He'd built it in me. I walked through the rooms one last time that night, turning off lights, checking locks, the ritual of ownership, of belonging. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was proof that truth wins, that preparation beats deception, that sometimes the underdog has been trained by the best teacher of all experience. In the workshop, I found a new project waiting, an old Victorian mantelpiece, just like the one Walter was restoring when he taught me about patience and spine. I ran my fingers along its damaged edges, already seeing what it could become. The wolves had come, wearing familiar faces just as Walter warned, but he'd prepared me for them. He'd given me more than property or money. He'd given me the tools to fight for what was mine, and the wisdom to know when the fight was over. The house was saved, the legacy preserved, and somewhere, I knew Walter was proud. The restoration was complete, the story, finally told, and me, I was home. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts, your own family experiences, your own battles for justice. I read every comment, Until next time, remember, guard your legacy, trust your instincts, and never let anyone steal what's rightfully yours.